everybody, welcome to Glenn's Garage. Today I thought I'd do a quick video on the basics of wheel sizes and wheel dimensions. Riveting stuff, I know, so when you follow along, see what we come up with. Okay everyone, so like I said in the introduction, I'm just going to go through the basics of wheel and tire sizes, measurements, the very basics for people, the introduction if you will to it. Not getting into huge detail about offset, width versus offset and fitment, things like that. This is just going to cover the very basics of wheel and tire if you're selecting new wheels, if you're buying new tires and you're changing sizes at all. This will give you a very basic guide on what you need to be looking for. Okay, so start with simple terminologies. Wheel or rim is the metal part. Tire is obviously the rubber part, the rubber piece. Bolt pattern. Bolt pattern is the attaching bolts that attach the wheel to your car. So the pattern is the number of them and their diameter, their circle diameter. And that changes a lot by vehicle. You would have thought automakers would have standardized that, which would have made it easy for everybody, but they didn't. So you do need to know what that is on your vehicle and obviously on what rims you're planning to put on the vehicle, because they have to be. Okay, so in terms of the wheel measurements, this is considered an 18 inch rim. It's 18 diameter, 8.5 inches wide. So those measurements, if you actually throw a tape measure across here, you can see it actually measures 19.5, which may be a little confusing. But the dimension is actually taken inside. If you took the tire off and you look inside the rim here, you'd be measuring from in here to here. So, or effectively the whole diameter in the tire when it's off the rim. So that's where the 18 inch comes from. And the same with the width. You're actually measuring inside the wheel, inside this lip on both sides, you're measuring. So it's not just throwing a tape measure on the outside. Now, the dimensions are typically cast in on the inside of the wheel here. I'll show you that in a minute, where the information typically is. Next thing in terms of measurements is bolt pattern. Now, it'll be typically listed as 5x or times 120, 114.3, 108, whatever. And it varies by manufacturer and even varies by vehicle or platform within the manufacturer. So nobody's really standardized it. This is BMW, that's considered typically 5120. That's been that way for quite a while. They had some 4-bolt ones in the earlier cars. Volkswagen, Audi typically do 5 bolts, 112 bolt circle. The Japanese, for the most part, use a 114.3 bolt circle, and that's millimeters. So just to confuse you further, the wheel diameters are measured in inches, and the width is in inches. The bolt pattern circle diameter is measured in millimeters. Yeah, I know. Okay, so if you want to measure the bolt pattern on the set of wheels you're looking at or wheels you have, you want to measure from the center of one bolt hole to the center of the other. Now, if it's 4 bolts or 6 bolt pattern, you just measure across because they're in line with each other. On the 5 bolt pattern, it's a little different because nothing's actually in line with the other one. So the easiest way to check on a 5 bolt pattern, go to one hole and measure from the outside edge and measure across the next hole here and measure to the center of that. And it gives you a pretty good idea. And you see that here, that's 120 millimeters or 12 centimeters, which is the bolt pattern for this particular wheel. So it gives you a good indication, a quick way to just double check the bolt pattern. Now, 2 other dimensions while we're on the back of the wheel here. One is hub diameter. This is the diameter in here. And that is, if I walk over to my car here, that's this hub diameter here. And the wheel sits over that, and it sits as quite a snug fit over that. And it centers the wheel. So it needs to be a good fit on that. And it also takes a lot of the load of the wheel. So it's important that actually that is the right diameter and the corresponding matching diameter, if you will. Now, if you've got a set of wheels and this is larger, you can buy rings, plastic or metal rings that sit in here, and they'll match the outside diameter to the wheel, and the inside diameter of the ring will match your hub. So they're called hub-centric rings. You can buy them. You need to measure the dimensions and get those, but you should always make sure your wheel is sitting on this and that's not free floating, which is then putting everything on these bolts to center the wheel and to take all the load from the wheel. It's not a good thing. It will never center perfectly. You will always have a slight vibration with that. So that's an important dimension to know. Easy to look up on the internet for your vehicle. And then you just have to measure on the actual wheel to confirm. The last one is they call offset. An offset is this surface here that mounts to the hub on your car, and where it is in relation to the center of the wheel, the center of the width of the wheel. If it's right in the center, it's considered zero offset. If it's forward or outside of the center, it's considered a positive offset. If it's way back in here, near the inside of the wheel, it's considered a negative offset. Now, all the wheels come from the OEM with an offset that's been set for clearance on the inside, as well as not sticking out too far on the outside so you pass your sheet metal. If you're changing wheel sizes, and especially if you're changing wheel width, you need to be aware that that changes as well. So I'm not going to go into detail on that. There's a sort of separate subject all to itself, but just be aware that your offset, if it's different than, and you're changing from what the original wheels were, you are going to be changing how the wheel sits relative to all the suspension parts. Okay, so all those measurements I've been talking about and everything else, typically the information does reside for a lot of it in here, stamped in the wheel. Now it's going to be, in most cases, going to be fairly dirty back here. If you've taken the wheel off your car and you're trying to check it, or you're buying a set of wheels from somebody, unless they're super, super clean, all the brake dust and road grime collects in here. So you have to do a bit of cleaning and scraping to get at it. But in this case here, here's what we're looking at. So 8.5 is your width, 18 is the diameter, and then you've got your offset here at 37 millimeters. Again, inches, millimeters. Now it doesn't give bolt pattern on here. You have to be able to measure that yourself, but it does tell you the width, diameter, and the offset of the wheel you're looking at. So I think that's pretty much covered how you measure a wheel, the basic measurements that you would need to look at for the actual wheel or rim. So we move on to the tire. Again, it needs to, the tire diameter needs to match the rim, as does the width, and then you have to pick your sidewall size, if you will. So the information's all here. In fact, there's a litany of information on the sidewall of a tire, but we'll just cover the very basics. Brand, in this case Pirelli. P0, so that's the particular model from Pirelli for this tire. 255, 35, 18 is the size. Now, much like wheels, there's a mix of measuring units that are used here. So 255 is the width of the tire, how wide it is, and that's in millimeters. 18 is the inside diameter of the tire, which is in inches. The R means it's a radial, which will be the construction most people are using, unless you're doing something particularly different. And then 35. Okay, so this is what they call the aspect ratio. This is a percentage of the width. So what it's saying here is if the width of this tire is 255 millimeters, the height of this tire, sidewall, is 35% of that. So it lets you calculate out what this outside diameter is, which is your rolling diameter, and that affects your speedometer, odometer, effectively your gearing. So your car is designed to run on a certain diameter of tire. And as you start changing wheel sizes, what you want is to maintain this diameter out here. So if this gets bigger, this gets smaller. So your tire, you have a lower profile tire to maintain this outer diameter. And there are tire size comparison tools on the internet. They're easy to find, where you plug in your existing size tire and then your new size you're looking at, the new size of wheel you're looking at. And then you can play with the width and the aspect ratio to get a diameter that's effectively the same as what you had. You really want it within a couple of percent so you don't really mess up things like speedometers and everything else. A lot of tires these days, they will mark what's considered the outside of the tire, the outside of the sidewall, and then the inside. If you have unidirectional tires, that is the tread that's designed to only rotate in one direction, it will also put an arrow here with the rotation on it, so you know the outside and the direction of rotation. So you only put it on the one side of the car to ensure the treads are working efficiently and getting rid of water and everything else as they're designed to do. There is, on all the tires, there's a date when it's made. In this case, it's here. So it was, the first two are the week of the year. So it's the 9th week of 2019 these tires were made. So that's good to know. If you're going out and buying tires, you're buying used tires, you've seen them on Marketplace or whatever, it's always good to ask or check what that is, because a tire gets old like anything else, the rubber starts to dry out. You look real carefully, you might see some very fine cracking. You really want to avoid that if you can. So old tires may have a ton of tread left on them, but they're getting old, they're getting dried out, and they're not as safe. So it's always good to check how old they are. They will last longer if they've been stored inside or in a garage all the time and not in sunlight, but still, you really should look for that as well. And then of course they will also tell you your tread, so it's all seasons, mud and snow, it's winter rated, all of that sort of thing as well. So really what you're doing here is, if you're changing from an existing setup, so your car came with 17-inch wheels or whatever, and you want to go to 18s or 19s, which they would call +1 or +2, you're going to be playing with different tire sizes to match those newer size wheels to match the diameter. So that's what you're going to be looking at, those aspect ratio and the width for, and adjusting accordingly so you can try and maintain that. So something else you might hear in all the talk about tires is what's called a staggered setup or a square setup. And what it means is, a square setup means the front wheel and tire and the rear wheel and tire are the same size. So they just call that a square setup. Staggered setup means you got a different size wheels, tires on the back than you do at the front. In the case here, I have 18s at the front, but they're 18 by 8s, and I have 18 by 8.5s at the back. So I run a 255/35 series tire at the back, and then at the front, 225/40/18s. So the 225 corresponds to a slightly narrower wheel, so it's 8 inches instead of 8.5. The 40 series is 40% of that 225, So what I've effectively got are the same rolling diameters in the front and the back, even though they have different tire sizes and technically different wheel sizes. Okay, so that was riveting. We have covered about all you can think of you need to cover for the basics of wheel and tire size. It's exciting, I know. Anyway, I hope it was helpful for you, or some part of it was at least, especially if you're looking at changing up your wheels and tires a little bit. It's always good to understand the numbers and what they actually mean if you're talking to people or you're even in a tire store. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed it, you can hit like and subscribe, that'd be great. Drop me a note. I have lots of other videos there. I've been working on this E46 convertible here, bringing her back to life, so there's quite a few videos there, still a few more to drop. And I just hope everyone has a great day out there. Thank you.